She stood at JFK Airport with 2 suitcases and her entire life savings, waiting for the man who promised to marry her. The man she'd sold her restaurant for. The man she'd never actually met. Her phone showed his last message. "Can't wait to see you." Then, nothing. The number disconnected. His photos disappeared one by one from their conversation thread. In that moment, standing in the chaos of strangers rushing past, Patricia Morales understood. She'd been scammed. The romance was fake. The promises were lies. And now she was completely alone in New York City, broke, abandoned, and 54 years old. What happened next would either destroy her or reveal a strength she never knew she had. The morning sun filtered through the salt-stained windows of Casa Marina, casting golden stripes across the terracotta floors that Patricia Morales had mopped herself for the past 18 years. She stood in the doorway at 5:30 a.m., just as she had every morning since 2005, breathing in the smell of fresh cilantro, lime, and the faint ocean breeze that drifted up from the San Diego harbor 3 blocks away. At 54 years old, Patricia's hands bore the evidence of her life's work. Burned scars from hot comals, knife cuts that had healed into white lines, knuckles swollen from arthritis that she ignored with ibuprofen, and stubbornness. Her dark hair, now streaked with silver she refused to dye, was already pulled back into the tight bun she wore like armor. Today, like every day, she had arrived before her staff, before the city woke, before anyone could see the woman behind the restaurant owner. Casa Marina wasn't just a business. It was Patricia's resurrection. She had opened it in 2005 with money scraped together from 3 jobs. A small loan from her sister Rosa, and the insurance payout from her ex-husband's truck accident. The same ex-husband who had left her and their daughter Michelle for a 23-year-old hairdresser in Tijuana. The restaurant occupied a converted house in the Barrio Logan neighborhood, where murals covered every wall and the street still smelled like her childhood. She had painted the exterior herself, a warm terracotta orange that reminded her of her grandmother's house in Ensenada. The menu was simple. The recipes her abuela had taught her, the flavors of Baja California that she'd grown up with. Pescado tacos with cabbage slaw, albondiga soup that customers claimed could cure heartbreak, tamales that she and Rosa still wrapped by hand every Christmas, selling hundreds to families who pre-ordered months in advance. Patricia walked through the dining room, running her fingers across the hand-carved wooden tables she'd bought from a craftsman in Rosarito. 18 years. 18 years of 70-hour weeks, of missing Michelle's school plays because she couldn't afford to hire additional staff, of eating standing up in the kitchen, of falling asleep with her phone in her hand, checking food costs and payroll. But it had worked. Casa Marina had survived the 2008 recession, when 3 restaurants on her block had closed. It had survived the pandemic, pivoting to takeout when indoor dining disappeared, Patricia herself delivering orders to elderly customers who were too afraid to leave their homes. It had survived because she had refused to let it die. The restaurant was her identity. When people in the neighborhood said Patricia, they meant Casa Marina Patricia, the woman who gave free meals to the homeless man who slept near the dumpster, the woman who hired ex-convicts when no one else would, the woman who had put her daughter through nursing school at UC San Diego with tips and overtime. Michelle was 28 now, working at Sharp Memorial Hospital, engaged to a kind physical therapist named David. She didn't need her mother's help anymore. Rosa had moved to Phoenix with her husband last year, closer to their grandchildren. Patricia's mother had passed in 2019, her father a decade before that. The restaurant was all she had left, and it was enough. Or at least, she had convinced herself it was enough. Until Michael. She had joined the dating app in January 2023, 6 months ago, at Michelle's insistence. "Mom, you're 54, not dead," her daughter had said, grabbing Patricia's phone during a Sunday dinner. You haven't been on a date since Bush was president. The first Bush. Patricia had protested. She didn't have time. She didn't look like the women in those apps. She was too old, too tired, too busy. But Michelle had persisted, creating a profile with photos that made Patricia uncomfortable. Pictures from Michelle's engagement party where Patricia was actually wearing makeup and a dress instead of her chef's coat. She had swiped through the app half-heartedly for weeks, ignoring the messages from men who opened with, "Hey, beautiful," or worse. She was about to delete it when Michael's message appeared. "I noticed your profile says you own a Mexican restaurant. My mother was from Guadalajara, and I've been searching for authentic albondiga soup since she passed. Any chance Casa Marina might be the place?" It was specific, respectful. It referenced something real in her profile instead of just her appearance. Patricia found herself reading it 3 times before responding. Their conversation began with food and expanded slowly, carefully. Michael claimed to be 58, a logistics consultant who traveled frequently for work but was based in New York. He sent photos. A handsome man with gray temples and kind eyes, wearing business casual clothing in what appeared to be hotel lobbies and airport lounges. He asked about her day, remembered details she'd mentioned in previous conversations, sent good morning messages that arrived before her alarm. For the first time in years, Patricia found herself smiling at her phone. By March, they were talking every day. Video calls late at night after the restaurant closed. Patricia sitting in her small apartment above Casa Marina, still smelling like garlic and grilled fish, while Michael appeared in various hotel rooms, always apologizing for the impersonal backgrounds, always promising that soon they'd meet in person. "I want to see your restaurant," he'd say. "I want to taste your grandmother's recipes. I want to take you somewhere nice, somewhere you don't have to cook." Patricia, who couldn't remember the last time someone had taken care of her instead of the reverse, felt something crack open in her chest. In April, Michael said he loved her. Patricia, lying alone in her bed, whispered it back. In May, he proposed. Not with a ring, not yet, he said, but with a plan. He wanted her to move to New York. He'd been offered a permanent position with a major company, something stable that would end his constant traveling. He had an apartment in Manhattan, a good neighborhood. They could get married, build a life together. She could open a new restaurant or not. She could finally rest, let someone else take care of her for once. "You've sacrificed enough," Michael said. His face pixelated slightly on her phone screen. "You've put everyone else first your whole life. Your daughter's grown. The restaurant. Patricia, baby, it's killing you. I can see it. You're exhausted. Come to New York. Let me love you. Let me give you the life you deserve." Patricia had cried. Not delicate tears, but the ugly shoulder-shaking sobs of a woman who had held everything together for so long that someone's gentleness felt like violence. Michelle had been skeptical. "Mom, you've never even met him in person. New York? You hate big cities? And sell Casa Marina? That restaurant is your whole life. Maybe that's the problem," Patricia had said quietly. "Maybe I need a life that isn't just work." By June, the plan was in motion. Michael needed her to come soon. His lease was ending, and he'd found a perfect apartment for them both. But he needed to move quickly. He'd send her the exact address once she confirmed her flight. He apologized that he couldn't fly to California first. He was locked into a contract overseas until the end of the month. But he'd be waiting at JFK when she landed. He promised. Patricia listed Casa Marina for sale in early July. The offers came quickly. The restaurant had a loyal customer base, consistent revenue, a reputation. A young couple, culinary school graduates, offered asking price. They wanted to keep the name, the recipes, the staff. It felt like a sign. On July 15th, 2023, Patricia signed the papers. The deposit hit her bank account 2 days later. $340,000. More money than she'd ever seen in her life. Michelle had driven her to the lawyer's office. In the car afterward, her daughter had gripped the steering wheel and said, "Mom, please, just go visit first. Don't sell the apartment. Don't commit everything until you actually meet him." "I've been talking to him for 6 months," Patricia said. "I know him." "You know a screen," Michelle said. "Please, I have a bad feeling." But Patricia had already made up her mind. She sold her apartment. She gave most of her furniture to Rosa's church. She packed 2 suitcases with her entire life and booked a one-way ticket to New York for July 28th. The night before her flight, she stood in the empty shell of Casa Marina. The new owners would take possession next week. The kitchen was already stripped, her grandmother's recipes boxed up to take with her. The dining room echoed. She should have felt loss. Instead, she felt lightness, relief, the weight of 18 years lifting from her shoulders. Tomorrow she would fly to New York. Tomorrow Michael would be waiting. Tomorrow her new life would begin. Patricia turned off the lights and locked the door for the last time. She didn't know she'd never get the key back. She didn't know that tomorrow, the only thing waiting for her would be silence. The plane touched down at JFK International Airport at 6:47 p.m. on July 28th, 2023. Patricia's hands were shaking as she powered on her phone, watching the screen light up with the New York skyline visible through the small airplane window. She'd barely slept during the 5-hour flight, too nervous, too excited, mentally rehearsing what she'd say when she finally saw Michael face to face. "I'm here," she texted him as the plane taxied toward the gate. "Just landed. Can't wait to see you." The message showed as delivered, then read. No response. Patricia told herself he was probably already at the airport, maybe stuck in traffic trying to park, his phone tucked away while he drove. New York traffic was legendary. She'd heard the stories. She gathered her carry-on, checked her reflection in her phone camera one more time. She'd worn the same dress from Michelle's engagement party photos, the ones Michael had complimented. Navy blue with small white flowers. She'd done her makeup on the plane, hands unsteady with turbulence and anticipation. The terminal was chaos. Patricia had never seen so many people in one place. Businessmen shouting into phones, families with crying children, teenagers with headphones ignoring everyone around them. The signs were overwhelming, pointing in dozens of directions. She followed the crowd toward baggage claim, her phone clutched in her hand, checking every few seconds for a response. Nothing. At baggage claim, she waited by Carousel 7, watching suitcases circle endlessly. Hers appeared, both of them, the large burgundy one, and the smaller black carry-on that held her most precious items. Her grandmother's handwritten recipe book, photos of Michelle as a baby, her mother's rosary. She pulled them off the conveyor belt, scanning the crowd for Michael's face. She'd memorized that face from hundreds of video calls. Gray temples, kind eyes. The slight scar on his left eyebrow, he'd said, came from a childhood bike accident. She knew exactly what he looked like. He wasn't there. Patricia stood in the center of baggage claim, as the crowd flowed around her like water around a stone. She tried calling. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. "Michael, I'm at baggage claim. Where are you?" Delivered. Read. No response. A security guard approached her. "Ma'am, you can't block the walkway." "I'm sorry," Patricia said, pulling her suitcases to the side. "I'm waiting for someone." She waited for 40 minutes. She called 8 times. She sent 12 text messages, each one a little more desperate than the last. "Is everything okay? Did something happen? Please answer." "Michael, I'm getting worried." At 8:30 p.m., she tried to access the address he'd promised to send. Scrolling back through their messages, she realized he'd never actually provided it. He'd said he would send it when she confirmed her flight, which she had 3 days ago. But looking at their conversation thread, she saw only her confirmation message. No address in response. Her hands went cold. She opened their text history, scrolling back through months of conversations, sweet messages, plans for their future, photos of him in hotel rooms. But as she looked closer, really looked, she realized something horrifying. There were no specific details. No last name. She only knew Michael. No company name for where he supposedly worked. No concrete information she could verify. She'd been so lonely, so desperate to believe in the fairy tale, that she'd never asked the questions that mattered. Patricia's breathing became shallow. The airport sounds faded to a dull roar. She called again. Voicemail. She sent another text. Please, I sold everything. I'm here. Where are you? At 9:15 p.m., the message status changed from delivered to nothing at all. She tried calling. The number was disconnected. Then, systematically, every photo Michael had ever sent began disappearing from their conversation thread. She watched in real time as his face vanished, message by message, replaced by gray boxes that read, "Media no longer available." He was erasing himself. Patricia stood in JFK Airport with 2 suitcases containing her entire life, $340,000 in her bank account, and the slowly dawning realization that she'd been scammed. Not robbed at gunpoint, not pickpocketed on a street corner, scammed by her own desperate need to be loved, to be chosen, to matter to someone again. She made her way to a row of plastic chairs near the exit and sat down, her legs no longer able to support her weight. Travelers rushed past, everyone knowing where they were going, everyone having someone waiting for them. Patricia had no one. She'd told Michelle not to worry, told her daughter she'd call when she landed safely, when she was settled at Michael's apartment. She couldn't call now, couldn't admit what a fool she'd been. Michelle had warned her. Rosa had been skeptical. Even the lawyer who'd handled the restaurant sale had gently suggested she might want to wait, to keep some assets in reserve. She'd ignored them all. Now she sat in an airport in a city she didn't know, with 2 suitcases and a bank account that would disappear as soon as Michael, or whoever he really was, made his move. She should call the bank. She should call the police. She should do something. Instead, she sat frozen, feeling the full weight of her humiliation. A young woman approached her cautiously. "Excuse me, are you okay?" Patricia looked up. The woman was maybe 30, wearing scrubs with a hospital ID badge. She looked concerned. "I'm fine," Patricia heard herself say. The lie tasted bitter. "You've been sitting here for over an hour," the woman said gently. "And you're crying." Patricia touched her face. It was wet. She hadn't even realized. "I'm a nurse," the woman continued. "I can help. Are you hurt? Lost?" Lost. Yes, that was the word. "I need to find a hotel," Patricia said, her voice mechanical. "Something cheap. There's a budget motel near the airport." The nurse hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "But it's safe. Do you have someone to call?" Patricia nodded, lying again. "Yes. Thank you." The nurse wrote down the motel's address and helped Patricia order a taxi, using an app Patricia didn't have installed. Before she left, she pressed a business card into Patricia's hand. "That's the hospital where I work. If you need help, any kind of help, call that number. Ask for Sarah. Promise me." Patricia promised, another lie, and climbed into the taxi. The motel was exactly as advertised. Not great, but safe. The room cost $89 per night, which felt obscene for a space barely larger than her restaurant storage closet. It smelled like industrial cleaner and cigarettes, despite the non-smoking sign on the door. The bedspread was stained. The window looked out at a parking lot. Patricia sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself break. She sobbed until her throat was raw, until her carefully applied makeup ran down her face in dark streaks, until her chest ached, and her eyes swelled nearly shut. She cried for her restaurant, for her grandmother's recipes now in someone else's hands, for the life she'd built and destroyed in 6 months of delusion. At midnight, she forced herself to open her banking app. The $340,000 was still there. At least he hadn't taken that yet. But she knew it was only a matter of time. Scammers were patient. They'd wait until she was most vulnerable, then strike. She needed to move the money. But where? She was too ashamed to call Michelle, too humiliated to face her daughter's justified anger. Rosa would be sympathetic but disappointed. Her friends from the restaurant, former friends now, would pity her. Patricia set an alarm for 6 a.m. and lay down fully clothed on top of the stained bedspread. Through the thin walls, she could hear a couple arguing in the next room, a baby crying somewhere down the hall, the constant rumble of planes overhead. This was her new reality. Not a Manhattan apartment with a man who loved her. A budget motel near JFK, alone with her suitcases and her shame. She closed her eyes and prayed for sleep that wouldn't come. Patricia woke to her alarm at 6 a.m., disoriented and aching. For 3 precious seconds, she didn't remember where she was, or why. Then reality crashed back, and she wanted to burrow under the scratchy motel blanket and never emerge. Instead, she forced herself upright. Survival mode, the same mode that had gotten her through her divorce, through her mother's death, through the pandemic, kicked in with mechanical precision. First, secure the money. She called her bank as soon as they opened at 8 a.m. Pacific time. The representative was sympathetic but firm. Yes, she could transfer funds to a new account. No, they couldn't stop someone from accessing her account if she'd given them her login information. Had she? Patricia's stomach dropped. 3 weeks ago, Michael had mentioned having trouble with his own bank's wire transfer system. He'd asked if she could check something for him. Just needed to see if a certain type of transfer was possible from her bank's interface. She'd logged in while on video chat with him, navigating to the transfer screen to show him the options. He'd been watching her type her password. "I need to move everything," Patricia told the representative. Now. By noon Eastern Time, she'd opened a new account at a different bank entirely and transferred all $340,000. It was still her money, but at least it was safer. The relief was minimal, like putting a Band-Aid on a severed limb. Second, find cheaper accommodations. The motel was nearly $90 per night. Even with her savings, she'd burn through money quickly in one of the most expensive cities in America. She spent hours on her phone, searching for rooms to rent, extended stay motels, anything affordable. Everything in Manhattan was astronomical. Queens was slightly better, but still far beyond what she'd expected. She finally found a weekly rate motel in Jamaica, Queens, for $400 per week. The photos looked grim, but it was half the price of where she was now. She checked out of the airport motel and took another taxi, watching the fare climb with each mile, eating into her carefully budgeted daily allowance. The Jamaica motel made the airport one look luxurious. The clerk behind bulletproof glass barely looked at her as she paid cash for the first week. Her room was on the 3rd floor, accessed by an exterior stairway that smelled like urine. The door's lock was flimsy. The window had bars. Patricia locked herself inside and sat on the edge of the sagging bed, surrounded by her 2 suitcases, and tried to figure out what to do next. She couldn't stay here indefinitely. $400 per week meant roughly $1,600 per month just for this horrible room, not counting food, transportation, or anything else. Her $340,000 seemed like a fortune until she did the math. At this rate, with no income, it would last maybe 5 years in New York, 5 years living in places like this, slowly burning through everything she'd worked for. She needed a job. But doing what? She was 54 years old in a city where she knew no one. Her entire work history was Casa Marina. She'd been self-employed for 18 years. Before that, she'd worked as a line cook. But that was decades ago, and her body couldn't handle the physical demands anymore. Her knees ached after standing for just a few hours. Her hands throbbed constantly. The restaurant industry in New York would chew her up and spit her out. She needed to go home to San Diego. But home to what? She'd sold her apartment. Her restaurant was gone. Michelle had a one-bedroom with David. There was no room for her mother to move in. Rosa was in Phoenix. All her friends, her community, her entire life had been connected to Casa Marina. She'd burned every bridge in a grand romantic gesture. And now, she was stranded. On the 4th day in the Jamaica motel, Patricia finally called Michelle. Her daughter answered on the first ring. "Mom! Oh my God, finally! I've been trying to reach you for days. How's New York? How's Michael?" Patricia opened her mouth to lie. To say everything was wonderful. To preserve her dignity just a little longer. Instead, she started crying. The truth spilled out in broken fragments. The airport. The disconnected number. The motel. The shame. Michelle listened in stunned silence, and Patricia braced herself for, "I told you so." For justified anger. For disappointment. Instead, Michelle said, "Mom. Oh, Mom, I'm coming to get you." "No," Patricia said immediately. "No, you have work. You have David. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're alone in New York. I'm buying a ticket right now. Michelle, I made this mistake. I have to fix it myself." "Mom, you spent my entire childhood fixing everything alone. Let me help you, please." But Patricia couldn't. The humiliation was too complete. Having her daughter fly across the country to rescue her from her own stupidity felt like admitting total defeat. "I need to think," Patricia said. "I need some time. I'll call you in a few days." She ended the call before Michelle could protest. That night, lying on the motel bed listening to a domestic dispute through the walls, Patricia admitted something to herself. She didn't want to go back to San Diego. Not because New York was better. It was objectively worse in every way. But because going back meant facing everyone who'd known her as Casa Marina Patricia, the successful businesswoman, the pillar of the community. She couldn't face them as Patricia the fool, Patricia the scam victim, Patricia who'd thrown away 18 years of work for a man who'd never existed. So she stayed, and she started looking for work. The job search was brutal. She applied to restaurants as a prep cook, but most wanted younger workers who could move fast. She tried grocery stores, retail positions, cleaning services. Her age worked against her. Her lack of local references hurt. The gap in her conventional employment history, 18 years of self-employment, raised questions she couldn't answer without revealing her story. After 2 weeks of rejections, she was hired at a diner in Astoria, Queens. The pay was $15 per hour plus tips for breakfast shift waitressing, starting at 5 a.m. The commute from Jamaica would take 90 minutes each way on the subway. She took it. Her first day, the manager, a woman named Rita, maybe 30 years old, looked at Patricia's resume and frowned. "You owned a restaurant?" "Yes," Patricia said. "Why are you applying here?" Patricia had prepared an answer. "I sold it. Wanted a change. Fresh start." Rita's skepticism was visible, but she was short-staffed. "Fine. Training starts tomorrow. Don't be late." The work was harder than Patricia remembered. The diner was always busy, always loud, always demanding. Her feet ached after the first hour. By the end of her shift at 1 p.m., she could barely walk. The tips were minimal, $20, maybe $30 on a good day. Her weekly income, including the hourly wage, averaged $450. She was making less than she'd paid herself per day at Casa Marina. But it was income. It was something. It kept her from completely drowning. The weeks blurred together. Wake at 3:30 a.m., subway by 4:15, work until 1 p.m., Subway
Sleep
back
by
to
7
7 p.m. because she had to do it all again the next day. She ate one meal daily, usually something from the diner's kitchen that Rita let her have for free. She lost weight. The navy dress with the white flowers hung loose on her frame. September arrived with cooler weather. Patricia had been in New York for 5 weeks and felt like a ghost. She existed but didn't live. She worked, slept, and woke to do it again. She hadn't told anyone else about the scam. Not Rosa. Not her former staff. No one but Michelle, who called every day, begging her mother to come home, offering to pay for the flight, to help her start over in San Diego. But Patricia couldn't. The shame was a physical weight pressing on her chest. She was eating a solitary dinner in her motel room, instant ramen prepared with the in-room coffee maker, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Patricia Morales?" A man's voice, professional. "Yes. Ms. Morales, this is Detective Frank Chen with the NYPD's Financial Crimes Unit. We've been investigating a series of romance scams operating in the New York area. Your name came up in our database. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Patricia's hands started shaking. "How did you find me?" she whispered. "You filed a fraud report with your bank when you transferred your accounts. They're required to report suspicious activity. The pattern matched several other cases we're investigating. Ms. Morales, I think you might have been victimized by an organized criminal operation. I'd like to ask you some questions." Patricia told him everything. The dating app, the 6 months of messages, Michael's face, his voice, his promises, the sale of her restaurant, the abandoned airport arrival, the disconnected number. Detective Chen listened, occasionally asking for specific details. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Ms. Morales, I'm sorry this happened to you. What you described matches a pattern we've been tracking. The person you knew as Michael is likely part of a syndicate running romance scams targeting middle-aged women with assets. We've identified at least 15 victims in the past year alone." "Can you catch him?" Patricia asked, hating how desperate she sounded. "We're trying, but these operations are sophisticated. They use VPNs, burner phones, stolen photos. The person you spoke to might not even be in the United States. I won't lie to you. The chances of recovering your money are very small. I didn't send him any money," Patricia said. "I still have it, all of it. You're lucky. Most victims transfer funds directly. But he got what he wanted. He isolated you, convinced you to liquidate your assets. He was probably planning a long-term con, waiting for the right moment to ask for the transfer. So he's still out there, doing this to other women. Yes, and that's why I'm calling. Would you be willing to help us? If we can gather enough evidence, enough victim testimonies, we might be able to identify patterns, track down the network." Patricia thought about the 15 other women. Women like her, lonely and hopeful, who'd been promised love and left with nothing. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Detective Chen explained the process, providing records of their communications, screenshots, any details she could remember. It wouldn't be fast, and it might not lead to arrests. But it was something. It was the first time since landing at JFK that Patricia felt anything other than shame. She had agency again. Purpose. "I'll help," she said. "Whatever you need." After the call ended, Patricia sat in her motel room with new resolve. She couldn't undo what had happened, couldn't get her restaurant back, couldn't erase the humiliation. But she could fight back. She opened her laptop, the one luxury she'd allowed herself to bring, and started documenting everything, every message, every promise, every lie. If she couldn't have justice, she'd at least have testimony. Outside, the city continued its endless noise. Sirens, car horns, shouts, the rumble of the subway below the street. New York didn't care about her pain. It barely noticed her existence. But Patricia Morales was still standing, bruised, diminished, but not broken. October brought cold rain to New York, the kind that soaked through Patricia's worn jacket and turned her morning commute into misery. She'd been in the city for 10 weeks now, and the routine had calcified into something close to numbness. Wake, work, survive, repeat. The diner job had become mechanical. She knew the regular customers, their orders, their tipping patterns. There was Jerry, who came every Tuesday for scrambled eggs and always left exactly 15%. Sandra, the home health care worker who ordered coffee to go at 5:30 a.m. and rounded up to the nearest dollar. The construction crew that occupied the corner booth Thursdays through Saturdays, loud and generous with tips when their paychecks cleared. Patricia smiled at them, poured their coffee, brought their food. They didn't know her story. To them, she was just the quiet older waitress who worked the early shift. She preferred it that way. Detective Chen called every couple of weeks with updates. The investigation was progressing slowly. They'd identified a pattern linking her case to others. Same messaging style, similar promises, identical manipulation tactics. The photos Michael had used were stolen from a real estate agent in Florida who'd never heard of Patricia or the scam. The phone numbers traced to burner phones purchased with stolen credit cards. "We're building a case," Chen told her during their last call. "But I have to be honest. The individuals behind this are likely overseas. Even if we identify them, extradition is complicated. The best we can do is shut down their operation and warn potential victims." "So he gets away with it," Patricia said flatly. "Maybe, but you're helping us prevent it from happening to others. That matters." It did matter. Patricia knew that intellectually, but emotionally, it felt hollow. She wanted accountability. She wanted to look Michael, whoever he really was, in the eye and make him understand what he'd taken from her. Not just money, her dignity, her community, her identity. The morning of October 17th started like any other. Patricia arrived at the diner at 4:55 a.m., tied on her apron, started the first pot of coffee. Rita was already there, looking stressed. "Luis called in sick," Rita said. Luis was the breakfast cook. "Can you handle the grill?" Patricia had been bothering her more lately. The arthritis worse in the cold weather. But Rita was desperate, and the grill position paid an extra $2 per hour. "Sure," Patricia said. By 7 a.m., the breakfast rush was in full swing. Patricia worked the grill with the muscle memory of 30 years in kitchens, flipping eggs, pressing hash browns, coordinating 6 orders simultaneously, while her hands screamed in protest. The heat aggravated her scars. Grease splattered her arms. She ignored it all, focused on the orders, on getting through the shift. She was plating pancakes when she heard a familiar voice at the counter. "Coffee black, and whatever's good for breakfast." Patricia's hands froze. She knew that voice. Knew it from hundreds of late-night phone calls, from sweet words whispered through a screen, from promises that had sounded like salvation. She turned slowly. Sitting at the counter, casual as anything, was the man from the photos. Gray temples, kind eyes that weren't kind at all. The slight scar on his left eyebrow. Michael. Their eyes met. For one long second, she saw recognition flicker across his face. Then, deliberately, he looked away as if she were a stranger. Patricia's vision tunneled. The diner sounds faded to white noise. Her hands, still holding the spatula, began to shake so violently that she had to set it down before she dropped it. He was here. In her diner, ordering coffee like a normal person. Like he hadn't destroyed her life. Rita noticed Patricia's stillness. "You okay?" "That man," Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "At the counter, I need..." What did she need? To call the police? To confront him? To scream until the entire diner knew what he'd done? "Take 5, Rita said, misreading her distress. You look pale. Go sit down." But Patricia couldn't sit down. The man, Michael, couldn't look away. Or whoever he really was scrolling through his phone, completely relaxed. He looked older than his photos, maybe mid-60s, well-dressed, affluent, the kind of person who blended seamlessly into New York's professional class. Rita poured his coffee. He thanked her with a charming smile that Patricia recognized, the same smile from their video calls. Patricia pulled her phone from her apron pocket with shaking hands and texted Detective Chen. "He's here. The man who scammed me. He's in my diner right now." The response came within seconds. "Do not confront him. Just observe. Can you take a photo discreetly?" Patricia positioned herself at the grill where she had a clear line of sight. She pretended to check her phone while angling the camera toward the counter. Click! The photo was slightly blurry but clearly showed his face. "Got it," she sent to Chen. "What now? Stay calm. Act normal. I'm sending officers to your location. What's the address?" Patricia provided it, her fingers fumbling on the keyboard. The man, she refused to think of him as Michael anymore, was eating the breakfast Rita had brought him. Eggs over easy, wheat toast, hash browns. He ate methodically, like someone with time to spare. 10 minutes passed like hours. Patricia forced herself to keep working, to flip eggs and pour coffee, and not stare at the man who'd stolen her life. But her hands shook so badly that she burned herself on the grill, barely registering the pain. Rita pulled her aside. "Seriously, what's wrong? You're freaking me out." "That man at the counter," Patricia whispered. "He's the one who scammed me." Rita's eyes widened. "The guy from... Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "Holy shit. Did you call the cops?" "They're coming." Rita looked between Patricia and the man, her expression hardening. 2 NYPD officers arrived 20 minutes later, entering the diner with careful casualness. They didn't announce themselves, just took seats near the counter. One of them, a young woman with her hair in a tight bun, made eye contact with Patricia and gave the slightest nod. The man at the counter didn't react. He finished his breakfast, left cash on the counter with a generous tip, and stood to leave. The officers moved. "Excuse me, sir. NYPD, we'd like to ask you a few questions." The man's expression didn't change. "About what?" "We can discuss that down at the station. Would you mind coming with us?" "Am I under arrest?" "Not at this time. We just want to talk." For a moment, Patricia thought he might run. But he didn't. He simply nodded, collected his jacket, and walked out with the officers flanking him. He didn't look at Patricia once. The diner erupted in whispers after they left. Patricia stood at the grill, trembling, unable to process what had just happened. Rita hugged her. "You okay?" "I don't know," Patricia said honestly. Detective Chen called an hour later. "Ms. Morales, the man we detained is named Robert Carlson. He's 59 years old, a retired insurance adjuster from Westchester. And we've confirmed he's been operating romance scams for at least 3 years. Is he going to jail?" "We're building the case. With your testimony and the evidence we've gathered from other victims, yes, I think we can make charges stick. But I need you to be prepared. This will go to trial. You'll have to testify. Face him in court. Relive everything." Patricia thought about that. About standing in a courtroom and telling strangers how stupid she'd been, how desperately lonely, how easily manipulated. "I'll do it," she said. "Whatever it takes." That night, back in her motel room, Patricia allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope for recovery. She'd accepted that her money, her restaurant, her old life were gone. But hope for justice. Hope that her testimony might protect other women from Robert Carlson's lies. And for the first time since landing at JFK, she felt something else too. Anger. Not the self-directed shame she'd been carrying. Not the embarrassment of being a victim. but clean, righteous fury at the man who'd seen her vulnerability and weaponized it for profit. Patricia had spent her whole life being accommodating, being nice, putting others first, swallowing her anger, making herself small. She was done with that. She opened her laptop and began writing everything she remembered about Robert Carlson. Every detail of their conversations, every promise he'd made, every manipulation tactic he'd used. Not just for Detective Chen's investigation, but for herself. She would testify. She would look Robert Carlson in the eye and make sure he understood exactly what he'd taken from her. And maybe, in doing so, she'd take something back. Outside, the city roared. Inside, Patricia Morales began planning her counterattack. The trial was scheduled for March 2024, 5 months after Robert Carlson's arrest. Detective Chen had warned Patricia that the legal system moved slowly, that she should prepare for a long process. He hadn't been wrong. In the months between October and March, Patricia's life transformed in ways she couldn't have predicted. The first change came from an unexpected source. 2 days after Carlson's arrest, Rita pulled Patricia aside at the diner. "I've been thinking," Rita said. "You said you owned a restaurant in California. Mexican food, right?" Patricia nodded, confused about where this was going. "Our weekend breakfast cook just quit. I know it's not the same as running your own place, but the kitchen position pays better than waitressing. $22 an hour. Are you interested?" Patricia stared at her. "You're offering me a promotion? You handled the grill like you were born on it. And honestly, after what you've been through, I figure you deserve something good. It wasn't Casa Marina. It wasn't even close. But it was a step up from waitressing, and it meant Patricia could work in a kitchen again, could cook instead of just serving." She took it. The work was hard. Weekend breakfast shifts meant she was on the grill from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays, the busiest days. But there was something healing about the rhythm of cooking, the sizzle of eggs on the griddle, the smell of bacon, the satisfaction of plating a perfect breakfast. It wasn't her grandmother's recipes, but it was honest work. And Patricia had missed cooking more than she'd realized. The second change came from Detective Chen's investigation. As the case against Carlson developed, Chen connected Patricia with a victim support group, other women who'd been scammed by romance frauds. The meetings were held weekly at a community center in Brooklyn. Patricia almost didn't go to the first one. The shame was still too raw. But Michelle, who'd been calling daily since learning about Carlson's arrest, had insisted. "Mom, you can't do this alone. You need people who understand." The group was small, 7 women ranging in age from 43 to 71. They sat in a circle in a fluorescent-lit room that smelled like old coffee and introduced themselves by first names only. "I'm Patricia. I was scammed by a man named Michael. Or Robert. I sold my restaurant and moved across the country for him." She'd expected judgment, pity. Instead, she found recognition. "I was scammed by a man named David. I gave him my retirement savings, $180,000. I'm Susan. A man named James convinced me to invest in his business. I lost my house. I'm Marie. I was engaged to a man named Thomas for 2 years. He said he was overseas with the military. I sent him money for emergency medical bills. $70,000. He was never in the military." Each story was different in details, but identical in structure. Isolation, requests love for money or dramatic life changes, then disappearance. Patricia cried during that first meeting. So did half the other women. But they also laughed, bitter, knowing laughter about the red flags they'd all ignored, the lies they'd believed, the desperation that had made them vulnerable. "I knew something was off," Marie said. "But I wanted it to be real so badly that I convinced myself I was being paranoid." "Same," Patricia admitted. "My daughter warned me. I got defensive." The facilitator, a social worker named Karen, nodded. That's the power of these scams. They exploit our fundamental human need for connection. There's no shame in wanting to be loved. But there was shame. Patricia carried it like a physical weight. The group helped, but it didn't erase the humiliation. What did help was action. In January, Detective Chen asked if Patricia would be willing to speak to a reporter writing a story about romance scams. The article would help raise awareness, potentially prevent other victims. Patricia's first instinct was to refuse. Going public meant everyone in San Diego would know. Her former customers, her friends, everyone who'd known her as the successful restaurateur. But then she thought about the 15 women Detective Chen had mentioned. About Jennifer, Susan, and Marie. About all the potential victims still out there, scrolling through dating apps, looking for connection. She agreed. The article ran in late January in a major newspaper with Patricia's full name and photo. The headline read, "Restaurant owner lost everything to romance scam. Now she's fighting back." Patricia's phone exploded. Messages from former customers expressing support. Calls from women sharing their own scam stories. And, unexpectedly, a call from Michelle that made Patricia cry. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. You're so brave." "I'm not brave," Patricia said. "I'm just trying to make something good come from this mess." "That's what bravery is," Michelle said. The article had another unexpected consequence. A week after it published, Patricia received an email from a woman named Elena Rodriguez, who owned a small community kitchen in the Bronx that provided affordable cooking space for food entrepreneurs. "Ms. Morales, I read your story in the newspaper and was moved by your resilience. I saw that you previously owned a Mexican restaurant in San Diego. I run a shared commercial kitchen space where small food businesses can develop their products. If you're interested in getting back into cooking, even just part-time, I'd love to talk." Patricia read the email 3 times, certain she was misunderstanding. But Elena's number was at the bottom, with an invitation to call. They met the following week. Elena's kitchen was modest but clean, equipped with professional-grade appliances, and organized into individual workstations. She rented space to caterers, food truck operators, and aspiring restaurant owners who couldn't afford their own commercial kitchens. "I have an opening on Thursday nights," Elena said. 6 to midnight. It's not prime time, but it's affordable. $300 a month for 1 night per week. You could develop a product, test recipes, maybe build a catering business, or just cook for yourself. Whatever you need." "I can't afford," Patricia started. "Actually, I'm offering you the first 2 months free. Consider it an investment in your recovery. After that, we can discuss payment plans." Patricia wanted to refuse out of pride. But she'd learned something in the past 6 months. Accepting help wasn't weakness. It was survival. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I accept." At first, she just cooked for herself. She started her grandmother's recipes that she'd missed desperately. Albondiga soup, carnitas, the tamales she used to make for Christmas. The familiar smells filled the kitchen, and something in Patricia's chest, something that had been clenched tight since July, finally loosened. She brought samples to the diner. Rita tried the albondiga soup and nearly cried. "Patricia, this is incredible. You could sell this." "I don't have a restaurant anymore." "So what? People sell food other ways. Food trucks, farmers markets, catering." The idea germinated slowly. Patricia had lost Casa Marina, yes, but she still knew how to cook. She still had her grandmother's recipes, and now she had access to a commercial kitchen. By February, she'd started small batch production. She made tamales on Thursday nights and sold them at the diner on Fridays. 2 dozen, $20 per dozen. Well, they sold out by noon. Rita put up a sign. "Authentic Baja-style tamales. Available Fridays only." order ahead. The orders increased, 20 dozen, 30. Patricia started coming to Elena's kitchen twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. The income was small, maybe $300 a week, after expenses. But it was hers, built from her own hands, her own recipes. She wasn't rebuilding Casa Marina. She was building something new. March arrived with Robert Carlson's trial. The courtroom was smaller than Patricia had expected, and colder. She sat in the witness gallery with Jennifer, Susan, and Marie, all of them prepared to testify. Carlson sat at the defense table in a suit, looking distinguished and harmless. If Patricia had passed him on the street, she'd never have suspected he was a predator. The trial lasted 4 days. The prosecution presented evidence systematically. Bank records showing suspicious transactions, testimony from digital forensics experts about the fake profiles Carlson had created, emotional testimony from his victims. When Patricia took the stand, she told her story clearly without crying, looking Carlson directly in the eye. She described the 6 months of grooming, the promises, the sale of her restaurant, the abandoned airport. Carlson's lawyer tried to suggest she'd been naive, that she should have known better. Patricia didn't flinch. "You're right," she said. "I should have been more careful. But that doesn't make what he did legal. He systematically manipulated me and at least 14 other women. He targeted our loneliness and our hope. That's not naivety. That's fraud." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on 15 counts of wire fraud. Guilty on 12 counts of identity theft. Counts of financial exploitation. Carlson showed no emotion as the verdict was read. Patricia felt a wave of something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but was close. Justice. Incomplete as it was. The sentencing was set for April. The prosecutor told Patricia that Carlson faced up to 20 years in federal prison. It wouldn't give her back her restaurant, wouldn't erase the trauma. But it was something. After the trial, Michelle flew to New York. It was the first time Patricia had seen her daughter in person since July. They met at Patricia's motel room. She was still in Jamaica, Queens, though she'd managed to negotiate the rate down to $350 per week. Michelle took one look at the room and started crying. "Mom, you can't live like this." "It's temporary," Patricia said, which was true. Elena had mentioned a friend with a room to rent in the Bronx, closer to the commercial kitchen. It was small but clean, and the rent was $800 per month, manageable with her combined income from the diner and her tamale business. "Come home to San Diego," Michelle pleaded. "Move in with David and me. We'll make space." Patricia hugged her daughter. "I appreciate that, I do. But I can't. I need to do this myself. I need to prove that I can survive what happened and still build something. You don't have anything to prove. Maybe not to you, but to myself. They spent the weekend together. Patricia showed Michelle her commercial kitchen space, introduced her to the support group women, took her to the diner where Rita made a fuss over Patricia's famous daughter, the nurse. Before Michelle left, she pressed something into Patricia's hand. An envelope. "Don't argue," Michelle said. "Just take it." Inside was a check for $5,000. "Michelle, I can't. You paid for my entire education. You sacrificed everything for me, my whole life. Let me help, please." Patricia wanted to refuse, but looking at her daughter's face, she saw that Michelle needed to give this gift as much as Patricia needed to receive it. "Thank you," she whispered. The money went into savings, a buffer against disaster, a small foundation for whatever came next. April brought Carlson's sentencing. 18 years in federal prison. He'd be 77 when released if he lived that long. It also brought spring to New York. Patricia noticed it on her morning walk to the subway. Trees budding in unexpected places, the air warming, the city shaking off winter. She'd been in New York for 9 months. She'd lost her restaurant, her home, Her identity. She'd been scammed, humiliated, reduced to a motel room and a diner job. But she'd survived. Her tamale business was growing. She'd been contacted by 2 restaurants interested in carrying her products. Elena had offered her a permanent kitchen lease at a discounted rate. The diner had promoted her to weekend kitchen manager with a raise to $25 an hour. She'd never have what she'd lost. Casa Marina was gone forever, sold to owners who'd changed the menu, repainted the walls, erased her grandmother's legacy. But Patricia had her recipes. She had her hands, scarred and aching but still capable. She had a new community. Rita, Elena, the support group women, Detective Chen, who called occasionally to check on her. And she had herself. Diminished but not destroyed. Bruised but not broken. On a warm evening in late April, Patricia stood in Elena's commercial kitchen making albondigas soup. The familiar smells wrapped around her like a grandmother's embrace. Her hands moved through the familiar motions, forming the meatballs, preparing the broth, the precise timing she'd learned decades ago. She thought about the woman who'd stepped off the plane at JFK 9 months earlier, desperate and romantic and convinced that love would save her. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, wiser, scarred by betrayal but strengthened by survival. Patricia Morales had sold her restaurant for love and lost everything. But from the ashes of that loss, she was building something new. Not Casa Marina. Something smaller, scrappier, more resilient. Something that was entirely, authentically hers. She ladled soup into containers for tomorrow's farmer's market, where she'd secured a weekly booth. The steam rose, carrying the scent of cilantro and comfort. Outside, New York roared its endless song. Inside, Patricia smiled. She was home.